Welcome to the Economy Magazine at I-24 News, where we bring you a daily view on world markets and the global economy. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Coming up today, Brazilian leaders face criticism as the South American giant loses economic steam. Norway's historical capital emerges as the Fyord nation's tech capital. And South African women break ground in the male-dominated mining sector. Let's start now with the headlines. Well, Greece back in the headlines Thursday, the parliament overwhelmingly approving a new batch of reforms demanded by its creditors. Lawmakers there voted 230 to 63 in favor, following an intense debate ending at 4 in the morning. Despite getting enough votes for the controversial legislation, Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras still faced a sweeping revolt among his own leftist Syriza party. Now, the reforms mark the final step before Greece can renew talks on a third bailout worth some $93 billion. Qualcomm will slash 15% of its workforce, aiming to cut $1.4 billion in costs. Responding to a nearly 50% drop in quarterly profit, the San Diego-based chip designer said it would cut spending by $1.4 billion. Well, last year, the company employed some 31,000 full-time and temporary staff, indicating that now some 4,500 employees could be given the axe. Well, the MERS epidemic taking a swipe at South Korea's economy. Economic growth there hit sharply by MERS and also weak exports. The country's economy grew a mere 0.3% in Q2 compared to 0.8% growth in the first quarter. South Korea has been struggling with a drop in exports, while the MERS virus has hurt consumer spending as well as tourism. 36 people have already died from MERS since May. Well, Japan's exports, meanwhile, rebounded in June, helped by a resurgence in demand from the United States. Exports grew 9.5% on the year last month, the fastest pace in 5 months. The reading, however, came in a bit below what economists were expecting. Imports fell 2.9% last month, but better than estimates. The trade balance came to a deficit of 69 billion yen, or some $550 million, missing projections of a surplus of 5.4 billion yen. Brazilian leaders in the crosshairs now as the South American giant appears to be losing economic steam. Brazil's GDP is expected to shrink to 1.7% this year. Shelby Weiner has this story.
Impeachment is on the minds of Brazilian citizens and politicians alike after a massive kickback scandal with the state-run oil company. President Rousseff has been facing harsh criticism, including from her own leftist Workers' Party. In the midst of this worsening corruption scandal and harsh economic slump, the country is having serious doubts about its leadership.
Things aren't going well with this government. The country is stopping. We are facing a very big recession. I read in the newspaper yesterday, unemployment is at the highest it's been in 20 years. My line of work is frozen, and there are a lot of people losing their jobs and being sent away. This isn't good for me or for anyone else.
Inflation has spiked after austerity measures were imposed on Latin America's largest economy. And that inflation is contributing to what is expected to be Brazil's steepest recession in 25 years. A new opinion poll shows Rousseff's approval rating has fallen below 8% in recent months. 62.8% favor her impeachment. And even those against impeachment don't necessarily have a positive view of the president.
I'm against impeachment because I think it is undemocratic, and I'm not from the Workers' Party. No matter how bad the government might be, we have to see it through to the end of the term.
Impeachment would require evidence that her campaign received money from the kickback scandal. Despite once being on the board of directors for Petrobras, Rousseff is not being investigated.
Impeachment
is a political movement coming from the opposition. It is a sentiment many parts of the population feel, but it doesn't have legal, judicial, or factual footing. That's why I think it is very unlikely that the Brazilian parliament will ask for impeachment. It would add to the political crisis and not solve it.
Brazil's GDP is expected to shrink to 1.7% this year. And on Wednesday, the government announced a dramatic lowering of its fiscal savings goal for the next 2 years. This year's primary surplus goal has been cut to $2.7 billion. The opinion survey shows that a majority of 85% believe that the president won't be able to manage the economic downturn, a lack of faith in her that will likely continue to grow.
The city of Trondheim, Norway, is more than 1,000 years old, the historical capital of the Fyord nation, but today considered the country's technology capital. We were able to speak with one of the city's tech community leaders on her visit to Israel. Take a look. On set, we have Jaya Tomlinson. She is a Canadian community builder and entrepreneur working in Norway's tech city, Trondheim. Jaya is co-founder of Diggs Innovation Center and The List and Tech List magazines. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, tell us about some of the startups that you're involved in.
You mentioned Diggs, which is it started as a co-working space in Trondheim, Norway, which is Norway's tech city. We call it tech city. It's an innovation hub with one of the largest entrepreneur and innovation and technology universities in Europe, the Norwegian University of Science and Technology. So Diggs is a center point for the innovation ecosystem in Trondheim. It's a place for startups to land, to grow, to accelerate, and to raise awareness.
Tell us, what is that ecosystem? What does it exactly mean? I've never heard of something like this.
Well, it's kind of a trend word to be saying innovation ecosystem. What we really mean is a community around business development. And there's a very big trend in the world at the moment with startup scenes. Tel Aviv is one of the, we say, one of the biggest hubs in the world at the moment. We have another very big hub in Trondheim, Norway. So an innovation ecosystem is a gathering of businesses, both young and old, students, researchers, educational institutions, and government figures who kind of blend together to raise awareness and build businesses interdependently.
I see. Well, you are a leader in this. What are some of the projects going forward that you're working on?
I am working to generally lift up the entire region. So I work to create connections. We have some really cool companies in Trondheim. We've got Novelda that has a new product called See-Through. You'll see a little clip on that perhaps. We have Stalker, which is a sensor-based drone that they can use for filming in the film industry or adventure sports that follows you around. We have Aussie Step, which is they call it the walker in the stairs. It's a device that is positioned on the wall to enable older people to continue living in their homes for longer.
So these devices are made available for the residents of this ecosystem of this city?
Well, they're made available for everyone. So they're products that are developed and launched with the intention of going global.
Well, you mentioned just lastly that Tel Aviv is this major tech hub. What kind of collaborations does Norway and Israel have on tech development?
We have had collaborations for quite a few decades. Our history has been quite long here in Israel, and one of the products that is kind of, or I guess activities that's worth mentioning is in renewable energies. Our one company called Bellona from Norway is doing some biomass research and solar energy research here. We've just won the Nobel Prize of Medicine at the NTNU, Norwegian University of Science and Technology. So our we call them the Moser pair. They're Moser and Moser couple, have studied neuroscience, and there's a possibility that I would like to recommend that they look at doing some collaborations with their university in Beersheba.
Well, thank you very much for that insight. Lovely to have you here on the program.
Thank you for having me.
On to a completely different subject now. The South African mining industry has been dominated by men for years. But now women are emerging as viable leaders and workers in the country's key sector, but not without its challenges. Let's look.
As shift supervisor, Bernice Motsiloa leads a team of 22 workers at Anglo American's Batupele platinum mine. She's an exception in the traditionally macho culture of South African mining. Her authority is respected, but Bernice remembers her colleagues' attitudes when she first went down the pits 13 years ago.
The men, they didn't like us. So they were telling us straight away that this is the men world, we don't know what you are looking for, and then now you said it's 50-50, you'll do this. You'll do half, I do half. And mind you, the first day or second day, it won't be easy to work like him. So actually you won't enjoy your job. Because now you will sweat. And then if you don't do that, yeah, we told you, they will discriminate you.
Women have only been allowed to work in the mines since 1996, after an apartheid-era ban was lifted. Today, 15% of mining employees are women. More than 3,000 of them work underground for Anglo American Platinum, South Africa's largest private sector employer, and they seem valued by their CEO.
There's lots of work where women are really good. Driving equipment. Often women are better operators of equipment than men are. They're more conscious, they're more diligent, they look after the equipment better. So there are jobs that are naturally, that women are actually better at than men.
But 350 meters underground, dangers abound. And for women, the risk of sexual harassment makes it even more dangerous. A female miner was raped and killed in another Anglo-American mine in 2012, and a woman was sexually assaulted in the changing rooms of Batupele in March 2015.
I was like shocked and didn't trust this environment anymore, like walking alone, what if this happens? So it really had an effect on me as a woman, working as a supervisor, whereby in some other places I must walk alone. What if somebody just show up and I don't know the person? So yeah, it did affect me.
Safety was reinforced with surveillance cameras and biometric identification. And in general, female miners say they feel comfortable doing their job.
Up to so far, I haven't had any problem working here. The men I work with behave well here.
Nozuko and Bernice both want to become mine overseers, an ambition that just a few years ago would have been inconceivable.
For analysis now of world markets and hedge fund returns, we are joined by Giordana Mosseri, Managing Director of Hedge Funds at Clarity Capital. Well, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. Good afternoon.
Well, how are the crises that we've seen in China and also in Greece impacting hedge fund returns?
Okay, that's a good question. We should start saying that the hedge fund industry has performed very well in the first semester. Since 2009, hedge funds haven't performed so well. So it has been a very successful first semester, and compared to the Standard & Poor's. June has been tricky. Of course, market collapsed, and as you mentioned, Greece and China has been a big driver of losses for the hedge fund industry. Not all the hedge fund has exposure to those countries, and especially Europe or China. However, we had a sell-off mood, and which impacted all the hedge fund. Despite the fact the hedge fund tends to be with very low net exposure, so limiting the risk and limiting the exposure to the market, anyhow, they keep taking some risk. And so we saw a general performance for the hedge fund industry of minus 1.3.
And what do you think they're impacted at the most, China or Greece?
Both. We had a lot of global hedge funds that started taking more exposure to Europe at the beginning of 2015, given the fact that the European Central Bank started the quantitative easing policy, so they injected a lot of liquidity into the market, and we saw the record performance for the European market up to April of up 20%. Mm-hmm. So extremely good environment for investment to Europe. So the global hedge fund exposure shifted to Europe, taking advantage of this big movement.
So that added liquidity almost offset what was happening in Greece in terms of Europe?
Yes. So this has been till April, May. In recent times, we saw that hedge funds are reducing exposure since it's more a political issue rather than a macro issue. And so we know the hedge fund tends to be today more cautious than the past. So back in May, they start cutting the exposure also because they want to crystallize the gain that they made in the first part of the year. Regarding China, we have selected hedge funds that are working in Asia. So we have a dedicated Chinese fund that, of course, lost money in June. Of course, they made also good money in April and May. So overall, the year-to-date performance is still very good. However, there is a lot of volatility.
All right. Well, speaking of volatility, now let's talk about Puerto Rico.
Yes, so Puerto Rico, another big issue. We know that the bulk of hedge funds are based in the U.S. We know that the majority of hedge funds also are investing in Puerto Rico, and a lot of money mutual funds are investing, wealth people are investing in Puerto Rico, has been a very interesting investment opportunity for years. Now we know that the governor of Puerto Rico said that they cannot pay anymore the debt, so we will see what happens. However, the hedge fund industry is already taking legal action in order to protect their gains and their position. We see that a lot of hedge funds have a broad exposure into Puerto Rico.
And just real fast, how are the hedge funds reacting to these crises?
So generally speaking, as said, the hedge fund industry is doing very well this year. So they are cutting risk in the portfolio. They are crystallizing gains. Generally speaking, since the big investors today in the hedge fund industry are pension funds, endowments, institutions, so they are less willing to take risk. So basically, the hedge fund industry is cutting risk and buy on cheap levels.
Well, thank you very much for your expert analysis. We do very much appreciate it here at I-24 News. That wraps up our show today. Do stay tuned tomorrow, same time, same place from the Jaffa Port in Tel Aviv. I'm Natalie Ehrlich. Thank you for watching.